The terrifying reality of Flocka. We've all seen the movies. Hordes of the undead, driven by a single primal urge to consume. It's the stuff of nightmares, right? But what if I told you there's a drug out there that can turn people into something eerily similar? A drug so powerful, so terrifying in its effects that it's being called the zombie drug? Yeah, this is some real-life scary stuff. We're talking about Flocka, a synthetic drug that's been wreaking havoc on communities across the country. It's cheap, it's potent, and it's leaving a trail of chaos and destruction in its wake. Users have been known to exhibit superhuman strength, become aggressive and paranoid, and experience terrifying hallucinations. We're not talking about your average night out gone wrong, folks. This is a whole different level of messed up. The stories coming out about Flocka are the stuff of urban legends, but unfortunately, they're all too real. People running naked through the streets convinced they're being chased by demons. Others exhibiting bizarre and violent behavior, putting themselves and others in danger. There have even been cases of users trying to break into police stations, convinced they're seeking refuge from imaginary threats. This isn't some Hollywood horror flick, folks. This is happening in our own backyards, and it's time we started paying attention. So what exactly is Flocka, and where did it come from? Well, it's part of a new wave of synthetic drugs known as cathinones, which you might have heard of before. They were going around a few years back as bath salts. These chemicals are designed to mimic the effects of drugs like cocaine and methamphetamine, but with far more unpredictable and dangerous results. Flocka, also known by its chemical name alpha-PVP, is a central nervous system stimulant. That means it sends your brain into overdrive, flooding it with dopamine and norepinephrine. These are your feel-good chemicals, the ones that give you that rush of pleasure and energy. But when they're released in such massive amounts, it's like cranking your brain up to 11. And let me tell you, the human body wasn't built for that kind of overload. The thing about these designer drugs is that they're constantly evolving. Chemists tweak the formulas, trying to stay one step ahead of the law, which creates a terrifying game of cat and mouse. By the time authorities crack down on one substance, there's a new, even more potent version hitting the streets. It's a never-ending cycle, and it's making it incredibly difficult to get a handle on this crisis. Now you might be thinking, hold on, Joe, zombies? Cannibals? Isn't that a bit much? And you wouldn't be the first person to wonder if the media is guilty of sensationalizing this whole Flocka thing. There's no doubt that some of the stories out there are exaggerated, fueled by fear and misinformation. But that doesn't mean we should dismiss the very real dangers of this drug. The truth is, Flocka is incredibly unpredictable. Even small doses can trigger extreme paranoia, hallucinations, and violent outbursts. And because it's so cheap and readily available, people are more likely to experiment with it, often without knowing the full extent of the risks. There have been some truly horrific cases linked to Flocka use, incidents that would make even the most hardened skeptic think twice. But it's important to remember that these cases are not the norm. Most Flocka users don't suddenly turn into flesh-eating monsters. However, the potential for violence both towards oneself and others is a very real and terrifying side effect of this drug. So how does Flocka actually work its dark magic on the brain? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about those neurotransmitters, dopamine and norepinephrine. These chemicals play a crucial role in regulating mood, motivation, heart rate, and a whole bunch of other essential functions. When Flocka enters the picture, it basically hijacks these systems, sending your brain and body into overdrive. Imagine you're on a roller coaster. It's exhilarating at first, that rush of adrenaline, the wind in your hair. But what happens when the ride never ends? When you're trapped in that state of heightened arousal, unable to get off? That's what it's like to be high on Flocka. Your heart races, your blood pressure spikes, your body temperature soars. You become agitated, paranoid, disconnected from reality. The long-term effects of Flocka abuse are even more concerning. Repeated use can lead to permanent damage to the brain and other vital organs. We're talking about heart problems, kidney failure, and an increased risk of stroke. And then there's the psychological toll, severe paranoia, psychosis, and even suicidal thoughts. This isn't a drug you just dabble in, folks. It can have serious, life-altering consequences. Section 5. The Face of Addiction, Beyond the Stereotypes. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. These people made bad choices. They should have known better. And while it's easy to judge from the outside, to label someone as an addict and wash our hands of the situation, the reality of addiction is far more complex. We need to remember that there's a human being behind every statistic, a story that goes beyond the headlines. Addiction doesn't discriminate. It can affect anyone, regardless of age, race, or socioeconomic status. There's often a complex interplay of factors that contribute to someone's struggle with substance abuse, genetics, mental health issues, trauma, social isolation, and lack of economic opportunity. It's rarely as simple as someone just being weak-willed or lacking morals. We need to move beyond the stigma and stereotypes surrounding addiction. It's not a moral failing, it's a public health crisis, and until we start treating it as such, we're going to continue to see these cycles of despair and destruction play out in our communities. Section 6. Desperation and despair. Unraveling the roots of drug abuse. So, why do people turn to a drug like Flakka in the first place? What drives someone to take such extreme risks with their health and well-being? Well, often it's about escaping pain, numbing the emotional and psychological wounds that run deep. Life can be tough, and for some people drugs offer a temporary reprieve from the daily grind, a way to cope with feelings of hopelessness and despair. We live in a world where people are increasingly disconnected from each other, feeling isolated and alone. There's a lot of pressure to succeed, to fit in, to project an image of happiness and fulfillment. But beneath the surface, many people are struggling. They're dealing with poverty, unemployment, broken relationships, and a lack of access to mental health care. When you're stuck in survival mode, when you feel like you have no control over your life, it's easy to see how drugs can become an attractive escape. They offer a sense of control, a way to numb the pain, and create a temporary illusion of well-being. But as with any quick fix, the relief is short-lived, and the consequences can be devastating. Section 7. Sensationalism or public service. How media shapes our perception. Now let's talk about the media's role in all of this. There's no doubt that the media plays a powerful role in shaping public perception of drug use and addiction. And when it comes to Flakka, there's been no shortage of sensationalized headlines and fear-mongering. We've all seen the stories. Cannibal drug turns people into zombies. Flakka, the scariest drug you've never heard of. It's enough to make anyone steer clear of this stuff. But while it's important to raise awareness about the dangers of Flakka, it's also crucial that we do so responsibly. When we focus solely on the most extreme and sensationalized cases, we risk perpetuating harmful stereotypes about drug users and addiction. We create a climate of fear and misunderstanding which ultimately makes it harder for people to seek help and recover. Instead of resorting to scare tactics, we need to focus on providing accurate and nuanced information about Flakka and its effects. We need to tell the whole story, not just the most shocking parts, and we need to do so with empathy and compassion, recognizing that behind every case of addiction is a human being who deserves our understanding and support. Section 8. On the front lines, first responders grapple with Flakka's fallout. The rise of Flakka hasn't just impacted individuals and families, it's also put a tremendous strain on our first responders. Police officers, paramedics, and emergency room staff are on the front lines of this crisis, dealing with the often unpredictable and dangerous behavior of those high on Flakka. Imagine being a police officer responding to a call about a naked man running through traffic, convinced he's being chased by invisible demons, or a paramedic trying to treat someone experiencing a psychotic break, exhibiting superhuman strength and aggression. These are not isolated incidents. They're becoming increasingly commonplace in communities grappling with Flakka use. First responders are often the first point of contact for individuals in crisis, and they play a vital role in de-escalating situations, providing medical attention, and connecting people with the resources they need. But they can't do it alone. They need adequate training, resources, and support to effectively address the complex challenges posed by Flakka and other synthetic drugs.